Okay, in this video we're going to look at a basic contour operation. And a contour operation is something that is going to come in and it's going to machine on the outer side of a piece of geometry or the inner side of the geometry. However, the tool is going to stay in contact with that geometry line. So the edge of the tool is going to ride right along either the inside or the outside of a piece of geometry. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to go over here and select Mill Toolpath, Contour, and it's going to pop up with our wireframe chaining dialog box again. Now, we're still going to use our full chain, but there is going to be something here that we need to take note of, and that is the direction that we chain this geometry. Since it is going to be a directional toolpath, meaning that the tool can be on one side or the other of this geometry, we need to make sure that we select it going the correct way. And there's a rule of thumb for that. When you're trying to machine the outside of a piece of geometry, you want your selection to be going clockwise. If you want your tool to be on the inside of the geometry, your selection method is going to be going counterclockwise. So let's take a look at that. I'm going to select here. And typically, your selection arrow or your direction is going to go away from the side of the entity that you click closest to. So if I select this line as my first entity, my selection arrow or my direction is going to go further away from the side that I selected, hence creating a clockwise rotation by the arrow. When I select OK, we're going to pick our tool, and I'm going to go back to the 3/8 end mill, and I'm going to go with a depth of -0.25, and I'm going to select OK. So as you can see, my toolpath geometry line, or my toolpath, is on the outside of my geometry. We'll look at that real quick under Verify. Perfect. And chances are with this particular part, that's what I wanted to do. Now let me show you what would happen if you were to have selected this in the counterclockwise method. There are times when you need to do that. And I'm going to actually go into the geometry selection of this toolpath, and I'm just going to delete that chain. So now I have no chain established for that toolpath. Geometry, and it shows you in parentheses 0 chains. So when I click that and I select Add Chain, it gives me my wireframe chaining box again, and I get to rechain this geometry. Except this time, I'm going to click on this side of the entity, the first entity that I select. And as I mentioned before, the arrow or the direction is going to go away from the endpoint closest to where you select. So if I select this side of this line, you can see my arrow or my direction of my chain is going counterclockwise. Okay? Click OK. Click OK and regenerate. And now you can see the difference in the way that MasterCAM generates that toolpath. It's going to plunge in right in the middle, and it's going to make a loop around. There may be times when you're trying to do something like this, and this is the required outcome, but you need to be able to know how to switch back and forth and why a certain selection may create a certain result. Now, something that I noticed that we haven't talked about, and we will in a future video, is these little arcs that come into the toolpath. These arcs are called lead in, lead out. And I'll have a separate video on lead in, lead out. But lead in, lead out are transitions into a toolpath so that the cutter doesn't just slam right into the material and chip an end mill. These end mills are pretty expensive, so you need to transition into the stock and make a smooth entry and a smooth exit. So MasterCAM gives us a full page of parameters that we can adjust to make that entry and exit as smooth as possible. Now just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and click OK and regenerate. And you can see now that it's just going to plunge straight in and make that cut around the inside perimeter of this thing. So hit play. And then you have a much cleaner inside profile cut. But it does leave the middle. So if you needed to remove the middle, of course you would go to a pocket toolpath instead of a contour. Now that looks pretty good virtually, but if you were to machine this in person, in real life, that plunge into that corner like that and then just taking off would leave a jagged edge right here. It would look fair, but you would see some imperfections in the surface, hence the reason for the entry and exit motions. Okay, and that is the basic toolpath operation for a contour.